So let's get started. We're here tonight to celebrate, again, this beautiful publication, the Madrona Project Volume, what is it? Volume 2, number 1. And so our first guest to kick this off this evening is Saul Weisberg. Saul is the co-founder of North Cascades Institute and was the Institute's executive director for 35 years, from 1986 until June of 2021. He lives in Bellingham with his wife, Shelley, and is now gainfully unemployed as a wandering poet naturalist. Coming out of retirement for tonight only, please welcome Saul Weisberg.
Right. Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you, Village Books. It's always a pleasure. So briefly, on behalf of North Cascades Institute, it's a real honor to introduce Holly Hughes this evening. Holly is a poet, an essayist, a writing teacher with a long and deep interest in the connection between nature and contemplative practice. I recently had the pleasure of spending a couple of weeks with her at a writing, meditation, and kayaking retreat in Southeast Alaska. It was the perfect way to kick off my retirement. Holly is the author of Holdfast and Sailing by Ravens and co-author of The Pen and the Bell, Mindful Writing in a Busy World. Her fine art chapbook, Passings, received an American Book Award in 2017. She also edited Beyond Forgetting, Poetry and Prose about Alzheimer's Disease. A former commercial salmon fisherman, Holly spent 30 summers working in Alaska and lives on the Olympic Peninsula. She continues to lead writing and mindfulness workshops throughout the Northwest, including at North Cascades Institute, Fish Trap, and the Rainier Writers Workshop. Most recently, the subject of tonight's presentation, Holly invited 64 Northwest women writers and artists to reflect on what it means to live and work in Cascadia during the past 19 months that challenged our spirits and resilience on every level. Holly has edited this amazing collection, Keep a Green Bough, Voices from the Heart of Cascadia, as part of the Madrona Project Series. Please join all of us in welcoming Holly Hughes.
Thank you so much, Saul, for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here tonight. It's great to see everybody. I'm going to start out by just some thank yous. It takes a village, and especially at the Village Bookstore. I have a small village to thank before we get started. First of all, Saul, thank you for that introduction and for your vision in founding North Cascades Institute. I'm so grateful to have taught there with Kurt Holting over this past decade. And I'm so glad you came on the Alaska trip this summer too. I also want to thank Christian Martin and Kim Nelson for the invitation to be part of the Nature of Writing series. There's so many great programs. I hope that you in the audience will come to more of them. We'll check them out. Claire, thank you, Claire, Village Books, for hosting this event and making this evening possible. Of course, we'd all love to be gathering in person, but are really happy to have the Zoom webinar format as an alternative, and really appreciate Claire's expertise and willingness to give this a try. I want to thank our Washington State Poet Laureate, Rena Priest, for her beautiful preface, which she'll be sharing with you soon. And in doing so, I want to also thank the Washington State Arts Commission and Humanities Washington for supporting bringing Rena to our community. This is what she does as Washington State Poet Laureate. And I know we're keeping her really busy doing good work. I'd also like to thank Empty Bowl, the publisher of the Madrona Project, and Michael Daly, the publisher whose vision it was to do this. And I was thrilled to be invited to edit Volume 2. I love its focus on community. And I'm also grateful that he produced such a beautiful book. I just want to do a quick shout out to the cover artist. If you can't see it on my screen, I hope you'll have your own piece soon. This wonderful image is by Linda Okazaki from Port Townsend, and the title is Valley of Love in Birdland. And it's taken from or written in response to a novel called The Conference of the Birds by Farid Uddin Attar, which is written in 1177. So I love that we're bringing that image forward into these times. And then finally, I need to thank all the contributors, the 64 artists and writers for trusting me with their work, and especially the 8 who are joining us tonight to share it. And I'm really looking forward to having you hear it all. But thank you, first of all, to those, or last of all, to those of you out there in Zoom land. We can't see you, we know you're there. We thank you for joining us on a Friday night when we know there are lots of other events like baseball competing for your attention. So I'm just going to say a few words from my introduction, and then I'll be turning it over to Rena. As I mentioned earlier, it was a huge honor to be invited to edit this volume. And as I reflected on Empty Bowl's purpose, which is literature and responsibility, and its theme, the care and preservation of human communities in wild places, I realized I also wanted writers to reflect on not only this place, but these historic times we're living through. And Saul mentioned that in his generous introduction. And so I accepted the invitation, and I proposed to focus on Northwest women's voices that included not just Washington State, but the Cascadia bioregion. And in doing this, I hope to focus not just on political boundaries, but on ecological and cultural boundaries, so that really looking at the whole bioregion. So we have contributors from Alaska all the way down to Southern Oregon, although the majority are here from Washington. So just briefly, I sent out a call for submissions in early January. The invitation came to me in the fall. And I'm going to read just an excerpt from it. And please keep in mind that this was written a year ago. And as I was rereading it before we got started, I realized a lot has changed and a lot has not. So here we go. It's an understatement to say these are challenging times. I want to believe we're at a hinge moment, an inflection point, awaiting what will emerge from the unprecedented upheaval that marked 2020. While the pandemic is not yet behind us, and still not yet behind us, we see a dim light on the horizon, and our democracy, shaky though it may be, is still intact. We have been painfully reminded that we must rebuild a democracy that acknowledges systemic racism and that will provide justice for all its people. The rifts in our economic system are starkly evident, and I hope we're re-envisioning an economy that honors the diverse histories, lives, and voices of all who shape it, as well as the land and sea upon which it depends. Every day brings us undeniable evidence that climate change is here, and we're living with its consequences. The years ahead will surely test our capacity for resilience. But we live in the Cascadia Salish Sea bioregion, shaped by wind, water, the traditions and wisdom of the indigenous people who paddled these waters, and the stories of our ancestors who were drawn to the Northwest. We're surrounded by towering Douglas fir and cedar, where salmon still return each fall, eagle and osprey soar in our gray skies, and kingfishers and blue herons wait, patient for a glint of fish. How does this inform our work as writers in this bioregion? So I'm asking you, my sister writers, to reflect on this moment in history and place, and write about what challenges, engages, or sustains you as we head together into whatever's ahead in 2021. So that's what I wrote, and I received over 100 submissions from women in Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. It was thrilling and a little overwhelming, I have to admit, but then came the challenge of choosing, ordering, putting them together into a cohesive whole. And I retreated to a friend's cabin on Orcas Island with a really big table to do this. Last came the title, Keep a Green Bough, Voices from the Heart of Cascadia. The title comes from an ancient Chinese saying, keep a green bough in your heart, the singing bird will come. Words that I hope resonate on many levels. So let's move on into the actual reading. We're going to start out. I was so honored. It's my honor to introduce Rena Priest of the Lummi Nation. I was so thrilled when Rena was selected for the Washington State Poet Laureate we were actually talking about Rena writing the preface before this happened. And one of the great delights of this project has been the opportunity to work with her and witness all the good work she's doing to bring awareness to our Indigenous brothers and sisters and their ongoing stewardship of the land and waters. And so I'll introduce Rena, and then we will continue on with the other readers. So Rena, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Out CEM, o helix and quinas and attach a litiakai, so weltanat, and a snatch of chlamisen. So pleased to be with you all here this evening, and I look forward to hearing the other contributors who've joined us. I'll just start with the preface. Perhaps it is old news that the word anthology breaks down from the Greek as anthos, flower, plus logia, collection. This is quite lovely on its own, but when taken from a straight Salish point of view, there is an additional layer of meaning. For in addition to being beautiful, the flowers we prize and cultivate are also useful. Function and elegance are at the heart of our cultural aesthetic, and in the Salish Sea bioregion, the most beautiful flowers are also sources of nourishment, medicine, and warmth. In the dirt below their shining blue blossoms, camas bulbs hold a unique protein-rich carbohydrate that can be roasted and enjoyed immediately, or dried and ground down into flour to be added to soups throughout the rainy winter. The blossoms of wild sweet roses become rose hips, a delicious source of beta-carotene, vitamin C, and other antioxidants, while radiant fireweed is vivid as well as versatile. Fireweed shoots can be eaten, its leaves can be made into tea, roots into medicine, and the downy seeds used as a fire starter or woven together with goat wool to make blankets. There are many other examples of beautiful and useful botanicals in our homelands, but my point in examining the multifaceted function of native flora is to draw a comparison to the literature presented in the following pages. The blooms collected in this anthology are of a type that are beautiful to the mind's eye and below the surface are nourishing to the spirit. Some may act as a bitter medicine. Some may fill a peculiar emptiness that you didn't know was there until you found you were filled up by what you'd read. As you read these stories and poems by regional writers, please acknowledge the Indigenous storytellers and stories of this region, and how their words too often go unheard among the din of voices who've come here to use this land and its riches as a palimpsest. This is also a land acknowledgement. And what is the point of a land acknowledgement? Is it to convince the descendants of colonizers to give tribes our land back? Wouldn't that be nice? The purpose of a land acknowledgement is also to bring to the forefront of your attention a truth that often goes untold, a history that is rarely mentioned. This land was not empty when the first whites arrived. This land, these rivers, the tidelands and the water waves. For the original inhabitants, this land was a garden, cultivated and cared for, cherished and understood. This land is still loved by the descendants of the people who were forced from their homes and confined to small reservations, denied access to usual and accustomed fishing, hunting, and harvesting grounds, denied their inherent right and spiritual obligation to gather nourishment in accordance with the cycles and rhythms of the seasons and in accordance with our spiritual laws that ensured the continued prosperity of our camas fields, berry crops, fish runs, fowl flocks, and game. To help us tend this garden, the ancestors provided intricate instructions that were passed down from generation to generation through traditional legends and stories. These stories contain teachings on how to live a beautiful life, how to live in a village alongside other people, how to live alongside the animal people, how to honor the gifts of the forests and the waterways so that they would continue to give their abundance. These stories are technology. A land acknowledgement asks you to ask yourself how you can make room for these stories and for their tellers, and for the wisdom of how to care for our garden. I was really so happy when Holly and I started talking about that being the preface. I'm just pleased with how this whole beautiful collection has turned out. It's been fun to see and fun to participate in all of these events. So my first poem that I'll share is called Remembering Tata at Tamqueekson, which is a place name. Tata is the affectionate name for mother in our Acclaimed, and Tamqueekson is the place name of Gooseberry Point, which is on the Lummi Reservation. A glossary of bell-related words, chimes, sings, peals, tolls. It is a feeling of silver. It rings and shines at the edges like the scales of a fish. It flickers, tintinnabulates the signal of a charm, of magic, of a movie memory sequence. And then there is mother, home from the cannery, covered in the scales of hundreds of gutted fish. She shimmers like a mermaid. Long day, I ask. When I lunch at noon, she replies, the sky's a polished silver spoon. By quitting time, tarnish has overtaken all signs of shine. That's how long the day is. You must have cleaned a lot of fish, I say. I think we cleaned out all of Puget Sound. There used to be gooseberries at Gooseberry Point. Now there is the cannery. Won't be long before all the fish are gone. Then the cannery will go, and all we'll have is hunger and sorrow. A burden is the heaviest bell of a carillon. Its register is low. I wish I had a magic wand to chime the cheerful sound of gooseberries sprouting up out of the ground. And my next poem is called A Poem is a Naming Ceremony. What has grown out of what has gone away? The clear-cut patch has grown larger on the mountain. The rivers have grown murky with timber trash, and there's enough runoff manure to grow corn out there on the tide flats. I don't want to think about what has gone away. I want to meander and play and forget myself until I can grow a new me in place of all this grief. Learn the language to see the cottonwood as Quayalach each, the dancing tree, the killer whales as Quilhamachan, our relatives under the sea. The whole glorious landscape filled with meaning to end my grieving. When I was young, I was invited to learn Quilnuchkin, the people's language, but I said no. I didn't understand. I thought I wanted to learn how to be rich. I didn't know the only way to possess all the wealth of the world is by naming it. Here is birdsong. Here's the kiss of a lover. Here's the feel of cold water at the peak of summer. I have spent my life with words trying to name a hint of what I lost by not learning my language. Estitimson, tutatisin, estitimson. So next I'll go ahead and introduce Jill McCabe Johnson, who'll be reading her essay. Hi, Shka.
Oh, Rena, that was beautiful. I was choked up listening to your words, and I just left with the feeling of how fortunate we are to have you as our State Poet Laureate here in Washington. So, just so much admiration and love for you and your words. It's really an honor to be part of this publication, and I want to thank Holly J. Hughes, our editor, Michael Daly, the publisher. Thank you to Saul Weisberg and Claire at Village Books for inviting us all to join this series and to be here. I'm honored to be here reading with these people, and thanks everybody for attending. I'm going to read an essay entitled Seasonal Round, and I want to acknowledge that this essay was made possible from support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Okay, Seasonal Round. If you look from the window of an eastbound flight from SeaTac Airport, or peer perhaps through the eyes of Raven high above the land, you can see America slip past, dappled and elusive under a whisper of cumulus. Tahoma looms high in the Cascade Range, and to the east spreads the kingdom of salmon, where the mighty Columbia runs dammed and gagged. Land of the Great Spirit, where 10,000 years of flood silt and soil gets parceled, plowed, and planted. For more than 10,000 years, Indigenous people have traversed the lands and waters of the Pacific Northwest in annual migrations called seasonal rounds. Interior Salish followed the seasons, traveling by foot, canoe, and later horseback and car to sites that offer nettle in spring, berries in summer, mushrooms, salmon, and deer in fall, shelter in winter. Coast Salish harvested and dried seaweeds for salts. They pickled bull kelp and dried berry mash into fruit leathers to eat in winter. Medicinal herbs like the leaves of plantain weed helped calm the pain of bee stings, and Wapato corms aided indigestion. Traveling to and from sites in the islands, the mainland, river mouths, and deeper inland, their common sense and experience told them that by following their ancient routes and traditions, the land provides for all. But common sense is not as common as we think. The late cultural anthropologist Clifford Geertz saw common sense as a cultural construct, customs formed by practicalities relevant to that culture. So when European Americans entered into this land, they brought their practicalities of sowing, grafting, rearing, and reaping close to a stationary home. Common sense told them that moving an entire village of people 2 to 4 times a year, sometimes more, was impractical at best, hazardous at worst. They could store more tools and accumulate more helpful household goods by staying put with everything within reach. Who needs all that? Native Americans might have wondered. They traveled light, unencumbered by the unnecessary. Theirs was a practice of paring down, quality over quantity, a watertight basket, a reliable blade, and anyone can find a handy rock to pummel roots or macerate herbs. Further common sense told them it was foolish to attempt subsistence on a piece of land that only provided during part of the year and offered paucity the rest. Those European Americans called themselves explorers and pioneers, but now seem more like colonial settlers or invaders. To their worldview, the lands they surveyed looked unmanaged and therefore unoccupied. Settling the West has always been about the exploitation of land and labor. The drivers behind that exploitation shifted from Spanish, French, and British royals and aristocracy to land barons and industrial barons, trading one kind of imperialism for another. Treaty commissioners facilitated the exploitation by divvying up the land, including portions of the Columbia Plateau between the Cascades and Rocky Mountains, arbitrarily grouping Indigenous peoples into confederations of tribes and designating the more valuable lands to be ceded. But as University of Washington professor emeritus Russell Lawrence Barsh writes, collective tribal ownership is a legal fiction, like the legal fictions that the Americas were legally vacant when Europeans first arrived, or that Indigenous Americans lacked fixed settlements, institutions, or laws. The commissioners perpetuated these fictions by categorizing people as belonging to tribal groups, so the US could negotiate treaties and land rights with a few purported leaders instead of hundreds of families. Even though the prevailing practice in Europe when governments or regimes changed was that individual property owners kept ownership of their land. The native people's individual property rights were not recognized. By 1888, nearly all the lands along the Columbia River went into private ownership and land grants to settlers. In certain areas with certain treaties, Indians at least retained access rights to fish their historic sites. However, the new inhabitants asserted the land was theirs exclusively. With barbed wire, bully tactics, and sometimes the courts, they attempted to block access. Colonial exploitation is not exclusive to the Pacific Northwest or even the Americas. It mirrors the exploitation by and disparities between landed gentry and those of lower socioeconomic status, disparities that inspired revolutions throughout the world from the late 18th century on. Many of the indigenous peoples of the Americas had similar class-based systems. However, the use of resources was typically restricted to a tenet of take only what you need. And wealth was often measured by how much was shared with others. Land with a profusion of sustainably maintained birds, fish, plant life, and ancient trees not only demonstrated a family's wealth, but attested to the care and responsibility they showed for future generations. The Coast Salish term Qiat refers to a place kept physically clean and spiritually healthy. And while we might not practice seasonal rounds in the same way many indigenous peoples have in the past, we can still allow access. Great Britain and much of Europe have secured access to natural places by enacting laws that guarantee rights to traverse historic trails and pathways, regardless of property ownership. Water follows seasonal rounds that cleanse and replenish the land. Clouds bring water inland, snow to mountains. Spring thaws rush down rivers that in turn sustain mammals, insects, reptiles, and birds. The salmon we cherish like minor gods in the Northwest carry row upstream. The spawning salmon die to feed their offspring. These gifts of water, deliverance, sacrifice, and sustenance make all their seasonal rounds, and so can we. It's my pleasure and honor to next listen to and pass the baton to Ann Spiers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am, of course, honored to be included in these wonderful pages. And and I echo the thanks that has been said before so well by the previous readers. So I'm going to open by first saying that I'm from Vashon Island, which is the traditional land of the Shobak people, who are now allied with Puyallups. And my poem is about Vashon. When the big lockdown came, it was like 9/11. Everything grew quiet. The school buses didn't come by with their creaking brakes. The commuters didn't whiz by. No one was going to Thriftway. And so what I realized is that everything also slowed down. And as we went through this last autumn, I mean, our first autumn under lockdown, everything slowed down. And here's what I experienced. An enzo is a circle drawn with ink and brush, and it's used as a meditative practice. And when you do your circle, you can close the circle or you could open the circle, which makes all the difference in the world, one way or another. Enzo, open, closed. The flush landscape disappears in a push of erasures, leaving an alphabet of sticks and spaces to reassemble in the slot between gray dawn and sunset's muting of light. Rain freezes mid-drop. My gloved hand pulls the newspaper from its box, roadside. The walk back takes months of nothing. Feverfew broken in my fingers, and Scotch broom pods pop in the odd heat. Last game, my turn up to bat. From the old man's orchard, we all steal apples. Maggots thread the flesh with brown silk. White buckets wait at the fence. Shadow pushes sun. Strapped to her gurney, Cassiopeia is left on stage, a fistful of stars smudged in the smoke of a hard day's night. The West is on fire. our last swim through herds of jellyfish. Moons they are, their gonads thickening orange, bumping us, their glisten sliding over and under. We burn fists of soft rush, mix ash and water for ink. Our letters ascend and descend. The letter O slows our progress. Perhaps the circle closed or open, as if we lift the brush relenting. Thank you. I think following me is, I'm going to have some help from Holly because I don't have the list in front of me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. That was a beautiful reading. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to hear all these poems read aloud by the poets. In some cases I have, and in some cases I haven't. So our next reader is Jessica Gigot. And you may have noticed, if you haven't, you should check it out. I'm posting a bio for each poet and essayist that's reading in the chat. So if you want information about them, it's all there, and you can download the chat at the end too, so you can refer to their books later. So please welcome Jessica Gigot, who has a small farm in Bow.
Great, thanks Holly, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm just going to read a few poems tonight, or two poems tonight, one from the anthology and then another one from my book, Feeding Hour. And I just want to mention really quick that it is just so wonderful to be in this virtual room with all of these wonderful women who've really been great teachers and supporters of me and just of poetry in general. So I appreciate it. And Claire too, who's been such a great host of so many wonderful events. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So this poem is called Two Mothers Walking, for Anna. We thought they were swans, far offshore in a huddle, lazy swans that chose to stay. But the long arc of orange gave them away. Stragglers, climate change refugees that in a normal year would never reach our northern cove of coastline. But what is normal anymore? We were talking about life and babies, my daughter about to walk, your daughter graduating. You want to clutch and hold her close, while mine refuses to be put down. They grow up so fast, you say. I need more time to myself, I say. Driven to near extinction by pollution, these pelicans are a miracle or an omen. We stride slowly, like the unfurling tide, acknowledging these visitors and the fierce uncertainty of what may come next. And I do want to add that since noticing the pelicans, there is a Facebook group called the American Pelicans of Padilla Bay. And apparently they're still there and they're growing in numbers. So it's they may be our resident pelicans now. So do check that out on Facebook. And I'm going to read one more poem, and this is called Fleece. The sheep are shorn 2 times a year. In fall, steam rises from white, now slender bodies that huddle together bare shoulder to bare shoulder. By now, each belly is full of new life. Without a half year's worth of wool, we can measure the swell of each ewe as she matures toward motherhood. Their lanolin-soaked fleeces are clouds piled in the barn, waiting to be cleaned and carded and spun into yarn. We celebrate this wonder, fiber transformed from grass, mindful that another season has passed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Wonderful. I just love hearing about life on the farm. Those are beautiful poems. And I was just down in California with all the pelicans. And of course, I thought of your wonderful poem. Next up, reading, we have another essay from Iris Graville. who lives on Lopez Island. I'll be posting her bio in the chat as well. And the title of the essay is Not Just a Drill, and it's part of a longer collection that I hope maybe she'll tell you a little bit about. Please welcome Iris.
Thank you, Holly. It's really good. It's good to be with all of you. And thank you so much for this opportunity, both to read tonight and to participate in this beautiful collection. And thanks as well to Village Books and North Cascades Institute and all of you for being here. I also wish those of you who don't have a copy of the book in your hands yet, I'm sorry that you can't see the beautiful artwork in this collection as well, along with the words. There are beautiful photographs and paintings. So just one more reason for you to get your own copy. As Holly mentioned, the title of the essay I'm reading is called Not Just a Drill. And it's what some people refer to as a hybrid essay that blends the ferry vessel emergencies with my reflections on the climate crisis. And it is an excerpt from an essay collection that is coming out in March called Writer in a Life Vest, Essays from the Salish Sea. The essay begins with an epigraph by Sylvia Earle, oceanographer and marine biologist. There's a terribly terrestrial mindset about what we need to do to take care of the planet, as if the ocean somehow doesn't matter or is so big, so vast that it can take care of itself, or that there is nothing that we could possibly do that we could harm the ocean. Growing up in Chicago and then smaller cities and towns in Southern Illinois and Indiana, I never imagined I'd someday live on an island in the Salish Sea. Now, after 25 years as an islander, I can't picture myself anywhere else but Lopez Island, Washington, one of 419 islands in the Salish Sea's San Juan archipelago. What power draws me to the Salish Sea? My true passion is for the way every lovely and fascinating part works with all the others in a lattice work of life. Tide pools shelter herring eggs that hatch and feed minke whales. The Salish Sea gives watershed forests with spawning Pacific salmon, such as Chinook, coho, and sockeye, feasts for bears, bald eagles, ravens, and martins. Melting mountain snow glides into rivers which flow into wetlands, empty into bays, and whirl to the sea. The ocean connects to canals and lakes and rivers on other continents, evaporates into clouds, and is filled by rain from skies around the globe. Over the years, I've learned not just about what I love, but also about the perils that threaten this jewel. If we don't take care of the Salish Sea and all that contributes to it, this interwoven lattice of beauty, wildness, fragility, and relationship will collapse. As an islander, I spend considerable hours on the Salish Sea, sometimes in a kayak, but primarily on Washington State ferries, the largest ferry system in the nation and third largest in the world. While ferries are my connection to the mainland, the inter-island route travels only among 4 islands in the San Juans: Lopez, Shaw, Orcas, and San Juan. Over the years, that circuit has supplied time and space for me to write. In 2018, I became the first ever writer in residence for the Washington State Ferry System aboard the MV Tillicum. Safety regulations require weekly fire drills on the ferry vessels. A crew member announces, "In a few minutes, we'll ring alarm bells. This is just a drill, not an actual emergency." I glance at posters in the cabin. They identify passenger gathering stations at each end of the vessel and carry sobering emergency messages. No matter how often I read them, I pause, reminded I might need to follow the directions sometime. Emergencies. Go to the nearest passenger assembly stations whenever you hear an emergency signal. It is important for your own safety that you follow the directions you are given. During this time of climate chaos, many of us create our own assembly stations. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, we gathered in living rooms and around kitchen tables to plan protests, devise strategies to be fossil fuel free, and write letters to government leaders and corporate executives. When we can't meet face-to-face, we organize virtually. We seek out those with special training and learn from them how to be of use during emergencies like oil tanker spills and how they care for sick or dying orcas. Some of us assemble on sacred grounds, in kayaks on the Salish Sea, and at climate conferences. We can no longer deny this is an emergency. Life jackets. Obtain a life jacket from a designated life jacket locker, underneath a bench seat, or from a crew member. Life jacket locations are clearly marked throughout the vessel. Put on life jackets as instructed by crew members. Adults should make sure that children are correctly fitted with their life jackets. By ignoring alarms sounded about coal, fracking, endangered owls and orcas and coral reefs, overdevelopment and overpopulation, we fail to ensure our children and grandchildren won't need life jackets. Now, thousands of teens like Greta Thunberg of Sweden are instructing us. Their message? Stop denying the earth is dying. The seas are rising, and so are we. Hypothermia protection. The crew will instruct passengers about hypothermia prevention and cold water survival techniques. Hypothermia is still a threat in the Salish Sea, even as global ocean temperatures rise. Survival techniques, those we need. Abandoned ship. 7 short rings, followed by 1 long ring on the general alarm bells, signal to abandon ship. Upon hearing the abandoned ship signal, go immediately to a passenger assembly station. This order will only be given if the captain is certain it is safer for you in a life raft than aboard the ferry. When the order to abandon ship is given, the crew will direct you to calmly and quickly move to the designated embarkation stations on the car deck. They represent the locations where you would leave the vessel. We've been hearing alarm bells for Earth for decades, at least since 1962, when Silent Spring author Rachel Carson warned us of the hazards of the pesticide DDT. Eyewitness stories, movies about inconvenient truths, and scientific reports make grave predictions about dying rainforests, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, more frequent catastrophic hurricanes and wildfires, and disappearing species. Their warnings signal emergencies more probable than those on the ferry. Earth's oceans, glaciers, air, drinking water, forests, and soil constantly sound short and long rings. An abandoned Earth signal, however, is not an option. There are no embarkation stations. There's nowhere a life raft can take us. We've stayed calm for too long. It's time to move quickly. This is not just a drill. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Oh, such a powerful essay. I really look forward to the whole collection. As I used to ride the ferry every day on my way to teach at Edmonds Community College. And so I had that drill memorized, and you brought it all back. And I love what you did with it as a structural device. Our next reader is Carolyne Wright from Seattle, and she's going to be reading Triple Acrostic Orcas. And if you have a copy of the book, you might want to look at it. There's the Triple Acrostic is a really fun form, and I love what she does with it here. So you may not hear it, but you'll see it on the page. Please welcome Carolyne Wright.
Well, thank you so much, Holly. Thank you to all of my fellow readers. Thank you, Claire. And thank you to Saul and everybody here. I really appreciate your being here in attendance. I'm coming to you from North Seattle, which is unacknowledged Duwamish land, I'm very grateful to be part of this anthology. My poem in the anthology is on page 62, and the acrostic is a form where the words, a word is spelled down the left-hand margin of the poem. And if you look, there's 2 sets of indentations, and each of those indentations also spells a word, and it indicates where the poem was written and more or less what it was about. Triple acrostic orcas. Why the pods that used to streak and shimmy in Puget Sound's granitic light have disappeared in recent decades. The reasons speed like a killer Chris-craft through clouded inland waters. Reasons subtle as a buccaneer's logic. Goliath girth trunks of Douglas fir that shadowed these estuaries and mussel-crowded coves, all felled by axes that traveled ever farther up the temperate rainforest's northernmost reaches. Their salal-shadowed mosses exempted from protection by our bombast. In the global dance that warms to its own internal warnings, coastlines yield like Roosevelt elk hides espaliered against a wall map of the illusory Northwest Passage. Aqua-tinted waves where the shades of orcas frolic. And this poem is in memory of K7, who was known as Lummi, who was the leader of the K-pod of the Puget Sound packs of pods of orcas. And she disappeared in December 2007 at about 98 years of age. And another little bit of information is that Holly and I learned that tomorrow is Orca Appreciation Day. So it was very appropriate to have me read tonight for this reading. So I think I won't read another poem because I want to make sure that there's enough time for everybody else. And our next reader after me is, I'm scrolling up to Shelley, Kirk, Rudeen, who will be reading poems.
Thank you. Nice to be with everyone this weekend, or this evening, this weekend. This is called Zumwalt Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
The shadows of clouds race northward. Above the shush of wind in pine and grass, listen. Timbers groaning, the arc creaking to life. This will be no gathering of 2 by 2. There will be no one place to call home. Everything on the move, leaving to become native to new places as the old homes change. Traveling by wind-blown seed, by wing, by cloven hoof and padded foot, in bellies and in dung, in water's flow. And what of the ones who travel by rhizome's reach, by the exquisite slowness of slime trail? And what of the ones who must stay? Is it only their names we will carry forward? And I'll read one more from my book. This one is called Resilience, which I think we all need.
Mm-hmm.
Midday moon tangles in limbs of twisted juniper, is lost behind the horizon's last mesa. Stark noon drains color from the range, turns sage from green to gray. Porches have torn screens, desperate dogs. Plants have names like bitterbrush. On the map, Lost Creek and Vale of Tears. Wait it out. Lean toward evening when light angles lower, making purple shadows in the folds and draws. Hold on till color floods willows by the dried up creek and late sun infuses leaves on each branch tip. When stars come out, let the sky be just as it appears, a dome, constellations wheeling in steady patterns. No unimaginable distances, no yawning black holes. Love the magpie for its long, extravagant tail, the vulture for the curve of its flight. Remember that the map also names a place called Sweetwater. Thank you. And I think Holly might introduce the last reader.
Yes, thank you, Shelley. That was a great choice for your second poem. And I had the pleasure of working with Shelley on the collection that she just read that poem from. So it was really nice to hear it again. Those of you who have been in any of my workshops know that I've often used Shelley's poem, the first one she read, Zumwalt Prairie, in my teaching. So you can finally meet her.
Mm-hmm.
Our last reader is Marie Eaton, and she's going to be reading A Dream Planting Itself, May 27th, 2020, and maybe she'll tell you more about this, her practice of writing a poem each day during the pandemic. And I also had the pleasure of working with Marie on this collection. So please welcome Marie Eaton.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much. So, as Holly said, I have a practice of writing daily with a community of other writers. And in that writing practice, we are given a line from a poem to begin our own work. Often it's a poem that we're not yet familiar with ourselves. And this, the title of this poem, A Dream Planting Itself, is a line from the poem For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth and Its Human Feet by Jo Harjo, from her collection, Conflict for Holy Beings. And I have deep gratitude for the inspiration of that lovely, lovely collection of hers. I also want to acknowledge that living in Bellingham, I live between the Nooksack and Lummi nations, and I express gratitude for their stewardship of this beautiful land here. So as Holly said, this poem, A Dream Planting Itself, was written on May 27th, 2020. And there's an epigraph. In the midst of this terrible despair, can we rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves? Arundhati Roy, from The Pandemic is a Portal in the Financial Times on April 3rd, 2020. Skies clear over Delhi, and Mount Everest can be seen from northern India for the first time in recorded history. A family of Egyptian geese crossed the empty tarmac of Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport. Flocks of wild turkeys strut around Harvard Yard as if they remember forests that once grew there. Perhaps this enforced isolation gifts us with the silence we need to listen to alarm bells of climate breakdown, raging forest fires, rapid Arctic ice melt, species extinction. Perhaps we have been given visions of recovery, renewal, and resurgence. Images of antlers glimpsed through shadowy power lines, turtles and seabirds on wide deserted sands, dolphins in Venice canals, and the sweet wild chorus of morning birds are more than flesh and feather and bone. Emissaries of hope and possibility, they are a dream planting itself, daring us to imagine a better world. So that's my poem from that collection, and I'd like to read one other. And this poem is called Come. And there are two phrases in it that you may not be familiar with. So Tikkun Olam is a Hebrew phrase that means acts of kindness performed to perfect or repair the world. And Kintsutsukori is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by mending areas of breakage with lacquer, dusted or mixed with powdered gold, which emphasizes the beauty and the utility of the breaks and the imperfections. Tikkun Olam and Kintsutsukori. Come. Come all seeking forgiveness for broken vows. Come carry your best of despair. Together we will praise the change. Come all scanning the horizon for a sign, whose boats are moored along the shore. Together we will praise the change and set sail into a new day. Tikkun Olam. Come all longing for balance and rest. Come holding your wounded heart in your hand. Together we will praise the change and weave a basket of solace and consolation. Come, stand in love's forge to melt in golden wonder. Together we will praise the change and piece broken bitter shards of faith and longing into a new whole. Kinsus Kori, come.
Oh, thank you, Marie. That is such a powerful poem. And a beautiful ending to this reading. I really love the way the poems, I hope, brought us to a place of hope in the end, while acknowledging the challenges we're facing, and especially with those poems from Marie. So thank you. Let's have a round of applause for all of our readers, and I hope that they can all hear what a pleasure it is to hear this work aloud. And even though we're in a Zoom room, we're still, we're united across space and time in doing this with these powerful words. And I'm so grateful to bring them to a larger audience. So thank you to the readers. Thank you to the audience for taking them in. Thank you to Rena and the Humanities Washington for being part of this event tonight, and to the North Cascades Institute for the invitation, and to Claire for rolling with us as we were putting this all together and handling the technology so that the poems can go out into the airwaves. I'm going to end with the last paragraph from my introduction, bringing in the words of one more writer that I deeply admire, and that's Kim Stafford, former Oregon Poet Laureate. And Kim said, "We have not arrived to explain, but to sing. Songbird guards his twig, his only weapon, his song." I hope our songs spark your imagination, rekindle and breathe life into these embers of hope. Together, may we envision a future that hears and honors all our voices. Thank you.
Wow. That was great. Very powerful, each and every reading. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm glad that you mentioned at the beginning, Holly, the cover and the cover artist, because this truly is it's a gorgeous publication. I mean, and it even feels good to hold. Like, it just feels nice. It smells nice, all of it. It's the full tactile experience as well as the wonderful content inside. So I don't know if we want to do a Q&A. Mostly in the Q&A, we just have inspiring, positive messages. We don't actually have any questions. So do any of you want to ask questions of one another? Just out loud, just blurt them out. No? Okay. We're all just basking in the
I'm definitely basking
in the glow of the reading. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, being, as I frequently say, the bookseller in the room, I am going to place the link to the page on Village Books website where you can purchase a copy of the Madrona Project. We do have them in stock. We're happy to ship them to you. We're happy to put them on hold if you want to just come and pick it up. I would also like to put in the chat the website to the North Cascades Institute, because if you have not checked out their amazing programming, now is the time, because there's just so much going on, and it's an amazing organization. So this event has been recorded. It's going to be on YouTube forever and ever. So you can always check it out again there and bask some more. So does anybody have any final comments that they would like to say this evening?
I have a comment and a question. Again, thank you to everybody for coming tonight and for all the praise, I guess. It's just such a pleasure to hear the words read aloud by the poets, and it brings me back to those days up on Orcas Island when I was just receiving all of this powerful work, and that it's so meaningful to me personally that we've come full circle in our sharing it with you. That is, and Claire, maybe you can address that. Will this reading be available to view again later? Will it be posted somewhere?
It will be on our YouTube channel. I can go ahead and let me just grab our YouTube channel link, if I can find it. Where are we? There we are. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see so many events that we have uploaded there. This event will be there probably within 24 hours. I will try to get it there. And then I did have a question whether or not we ship internationally. Sadly, right now we are not shipping internationally. The expense is very great. So I'm afraid that right now we are not. So I am sorry. What was your name? Diane. Or no, excuse me, Shika.
Shika is coming to us from Hong Kong, where it's the next day right now. And
oh,
I'm
my goodness.
Glad she's able to join us.
Oh, wow. Welcome.
Shika, I will send you a copy. Yeah, I'm happy to send you a copy, Shika, so that you can get one. Shika's a former student of mine, so it's especially meaningful to me that she's here tonight. Yeah.
Let's see, someone is asking about copying folks would like copies of the bios that are in the chat. I'm trying to figure out how, what I can do. I can email everybody who registered for this event and who attended this event. I can email and include the bios of everyone in that email. So be looking for an email from me, and that will include everyone's information. I think that's probably the easiest way to get that to everyone.
Yet another reason for people to buy the book, though, because all those bios are in the book.
The bios, as well as the beautiful artwork. Yeah, it's a great reason to buy the book. Thank you, Iris. Iris, I have to know. I feel like, Iris, did you get to name the street you live on? Because I got to pack up and ship your copy to you, and your road has the most fabulous name. And I thought, I wonder if Iris got to choose that.
Well, it is Heffalump Lane, and our neighborhood chose it to honor an elderly couple who lived on the road, who were both librarians, and the woman in that couple, Ollie Smulders, was a children's librarian and a fabulous storyteller, and she loved Winnie the Pooh. So that was in her honor, and you always know. If people know about Winnie the Pooh when I give that address, and they either go, huh? Or, oh.
Right. Well, I thought it was darling. So, yep, Heffalump Lane, Heffalump Road. Anyway, yep, what a magical road to live on. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you to everyone in the audience. Everybody be well, and hopefully we'll see you at a future North Cascades Nature of Writing Series event. Okay, good night.
Thank you, Claire. Good.